How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be going over some of the specs or potential specs that DJI might release with the Mavic 4 Pro. Going to go ahead and react to some of the videos that are currently out regarding the potential leaks. So let's go ahead and dive in.
We're seeing them pretty much everywhere. They must just have bought a whole ton of them, and they're putting them in just about everything. But last but not least, speaking of O4, speaking of OcuSync 4, bringing everything to OcuSync 4 is the Mavic 4 Pro. And what we have is a ton of new details and leaked photos of this product. It sounds like DJI is kind of testing this thing just right out in the open. We've got random pictures and videos of just people.
Now they're saying that one of the reasons why they did a spherical shape for the camera is because it's more aerodynamic and it can look directly straight up and straight down.
Outside of DJI headquarters, just testing this thing like crazy. And obviously it's covered in stickers, but it still retains that design that we've been seeing.
Personal opinion, I think that DJI does that on purpose, and that is to create noise around their products, so people start speculating, people start talking about them. There's articles coming out every day regarding the potential new drone that they're going to be releasing, so everything is done on purpose. I don't think this is all accidental.
More and more, where everything has been kind of rounded off at the front and back. The deck or the shelf that traditionally goes over the top and holds the gimbal unit has been removed and replaced with two big bulbous eyeballs.
Now, depending, maybe her hands are small, but that looks ginormous.
In the front for what we think is going to be 180-degree fisheye view, as well as the new optical unit, which is that big, I've been describing it as like a softball, maybe it's more like a tennis ball, but it's this big bulbous thing that will allow for 90-degree to negative 80-degree tilt. I talked about that in my last video. Those specs continue to seem to be accurate, but what we have today is more information about the specs, about the camera unit itself, more details on the unit and the battery, specifically that main Hasselblad camera, and I want to kind of go through that now. The expectation is that this will still be a 4/3 sensor, a micro 4/3 sensor. There had been some talk about it going up to the APS-C size, but again, I've been skeptical of that rumor, considering the fact that the Zenmuse cameras that are for the Inspire drone, I don't think they're going to cannibalize that particular level of product that they have at this time, and I was expecting a significant improvement in the existing 20 megapixel 4/3 sensor, which it looks like we're getting, which is a 4/3 sensor at 100 megapixels. So that is a 5x improvement in resolution.
So if we're going to go from 20 to 100 megapixels on the same sensor, now it could be dual stacked sensor, but it's still, in my opinion, it's mostly going to be software. Yeah, you're going to see improvement, especially if you're cropping, but I personally like that organic look that 20 megapixels gives you, because I used to own the Air 2S? No, I'm sorry, Air 2, and that was giving you 48 megapixel picture, and as compared to the Air 3S that gave you 20 megapixels. Now, the difference between those two pictures were day and night. The 20 megapixel give you a much cleaner picture than the 48 megapixel on the Air 2. So I think same thing here. They're going to bump up, if they do bump up to 100 megapixels, which I kind of doubt. It's a bit much. I think they're going to maintain. Maybe they'll bump it up to 48, maybe 50 megapixels. 100 is a little extreme, but I could be wrong. Then again, I don't expect crazy amount of difference in quality regarding the sensor.
Now, I think since the Hasselblad 1-inch and the Mavic 2 Pro, we've been pretty consistent in seeing 24 millimeter focal lengths, but the news that we're getting today is that that would actually bump up to a 28 millimeter focal length.
Now again, the 24 millimeter, which is wider, and if they're going to move up to the 28, I heard the rumors as well. I think it's a plus me personally, when I'm shooting at 24 with the main camera on the Mavic 3 Pro, I feel like 24 is a little bit too wide, whereas at 28 is a much better suited for a drone, since you're already at such a long distance from the subject for the most part. So I think that 28 would be a better step than the 24 millimeter that the Mavic 3 Pro currently carries.
It's not a huge change. That 4 millimeters doesn't do a lot.
Now, I will disagree with that because I shoot on digital cameras, and I used to own the 24 to 70 f2.8 RF Canon lens, and I switched over to the 28 to 70 f2 Canon RF lens, and that 4 millimeter is definitely a significant difference, especially if you're shooting weddings or you're in the tight spots. That 4 millimeter definitely makes a huge difference. So I disagree with the 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters doesn't make a big difference.
But it's not nothing if you want that widest possible field of view. Personally, I don't. When I fly my Mavic 2 Pro, I normally use the punch-in feature to get the absolute best quality out of the center of that sensor. So I'm not really worried about not having that extra 4 millimeters. By my back of the napkin math, it looks like that's going to take it from about 84 degree field of view to about a 75 degree field of view. One big improvement, though, is that the variable aperture will actually go from an f2.8 to an f2. So that is half a stop.
That's a huge difference. That's the reason actually why I switched over from 24 to 70 to 28 to 70, because I noticed that the 2.8 was just not fast enough, and then the f2 on a 28 to 70 RF Canon lens was much faster, and it gave you that prime feel as well. It definitely separates the subject from the background. So that's going to be a significant difference. It's also going to be a significant difference in the lower light capabilities.
Of additional light, and that can be huge when you're in more dynamically lit scenes. Speaking of dynamic range, the claim continues to be that the sensor is going to have 14 stops of dynamic range, and one of the ways that they're going to do that is by implementing in this particular sensor a dual native ISO system. Now, if you're not familiar with dual ISO or a native ISO, it's the ISO that or the sensitivity level that when your sensor is set to it, it gets the best quality image and the least amount of noise, especially when looking in the shadowy areas. So if you have a very dynamic scene, like say a sunset at Oceanside Pier, you're going to have areas that are going to be in somewhat darker or shadowy areas. And if you try to bring those up or just display them as they are in the scene, the amount of noise there can be determined by the sensitivity of your sensor. And because one of the things that DJI has been doing a lot of work on is the capacity for their drones to operate in darker environments, this is not a surprise. But it means that this sensor will have native ISO of 400 and 1600. So what does that mean? Well, it means that at 400 or below, you're going to get the best possible quality. But it means that if you go up to 400, you're really not going to lose anything. In fact, there's actually a higher probability that you might actually lose something going down from 400 down to 200 or 100. But it also means that as you increase your ISO to, say, 640 or 800 or 1000 or 1200, that once you get closer to 1600, say 1200 ISO, you might actually be better off at 1600 ISO than you would be at 800 or 1200 or 1000, because of the fact that that second tier, that next level of native ISO will kick in, and the sensor behaves better at 1600 than it does somewhere between 400.
Just to cut that down a little shorter, basically dual ISO is going to be, as he mentioned, it's going to be better for the higher dynamic range photos where you have hard shadows and you have extremely bright areas. And it also going to improve on night scenes. So if you're shooting, let's say, night city scene, it's going to give you a much better performance at the reason why is because it is more calibrated for that higher ISO. So you're not going to get best performance by shooting at 100 ISO, which requires more time and more light to enter the sensor, where here it's more designed to start at 400 to give you the same quality as a 100 ISO would. That's basically all it is, which once again that will improve your night photography and night video.
100 and 1600 that you might actually get, even depending on how this ISO capacity. At the same time, I'm on this drone, like we saw on the Air 3S, that would improve low light performance, reduce noise. So really, those two things combined, along with that smaller aperture, and the fact that you're going to have that much higher resolution sensor, which traditionally doesn't improve low light performance, but since they're probably going to be using a lot of those pixels to do some creative AI math in the background to machine learn out noise.
That's actually the other thing. If they do implement 100 megapixels, that's going to dramatically decrease the quality for the low light capabilities. The more pixels you have, the worse the images do get for the night photography. The smaller the megapixels, the larger actual megapixels are, the better low light capabilities you have.
You're probably going to see a significant improvement in both image quality as well as dynamic range with all of those tools brought together. One feature that I'm actually super excited to hear about, and you've heard me talk about this before, especially when we talked about the Air 3S, and why I said the Air 3S was not pro enough for me, is that I use ND filters, because if you are filming cinematic content, you want to be using that 180-degree shutter rule. You want to be matching your frame rate to your shutter. And to do that, sometimes you don't want to up your ISO. Sometimes you can't lower it any further, and you don't want to increase your shutter speed. So the only option that you have is to basically put sunglasses in front of your lens, and that's what an ND filter is, so that you can control how much light gets let in. The ND filter, in conjunction with that variable aperture control on the Mavic Pro, gives you the ability to dial in your light exactly the way that you need it, so that your scene is lit exactly where it needs to be, and you're still getting the best possible sensitivity on your sensor, and you're shooting at the shutter speed that makes sense for your scene and for your frame rate. So the Mavic 4 Pro is going to be coming with an electronic ND filter built in that is both variable and stepless, meaning that it won't have
Now, that is speculation. Judging on that particular technology, I personally doubt that the Mavic 4 Pro is going to have built-in ND filters, the stepless, simply because I've used Canon Cinematic line video cameras that had built-in ND filters. And because of that, it just adds so much more size, and I just don't think that they'll be able to make a compact drone with that type of technology built in. And that will include the weight and the size. And I don't think that's something that DJI wants to compromise on.
Notches or points. It'll literally just be a linear progression, an analog progression, from whatever the base would be all the way up to the top.
Also, you have to remember, the more moving parts, the more chances that something is going to break. That's the one thing, that the more technology gets put in, the more chances of something failing.
So depending on the number of stops of light you need to reduce, especially if you're in a bright, sunny environment, but you still want to shoot at, say, f2, and you still want to make sure that you have ISO 100, and you still want to make sure that you have a 180-degree shutter rule, it's important to have that capacity. And not having to add filters to the exterior of the camera is going to be great, especially considering the shape of this imaging package where it looks like it's a big circle. I don't know how you're going to put filters on that. And it sounds like DJI solved that for us by putting the filter on the inside. Now, what we don't know is really anything yet about the other two cameras. We don't know if it's still going to be packing that 70 and 145 millimeter equivalent lens.
Most likely, I doubt they're going to get rid of those zoom lenses.
I'm going to assume that they still will because we're still seeing 3 cameras on this package, and I'm going to assume they're going to upgrade both of those to the latest version of that 1/1/3 sensor that we have in the Air 3S, but we don't know if that's going to also incorporate this ND filter. Considering the resolution bump, though, on this main camera, I am expecting them to, at least from a marketing standpoint, push that this lens would be capable of not only shooting 100 megapixel images, which is going to be bared down, right? It's really only like 25 megapixels, but they might offer a 2x crop mode. They might call it a digital zoom, they might call it crop, they might just call it a fourth lens like Apple does with the iPhone. And that would be a 56 millimeter lens equivalent if it was a 2x crop, and it would still be about 25 megapixels. So a 25 megapixel 2x crop image for stills and video, I think would be pretty cool, and you'd have the option of effectively a fourth lens using the quality and the dynamic range of the Hasselblad sensor. On the video side of things, it looks like we're going to be getting 6K at 60 frames per second, as well as 4K at 120. And the thing to remember about 6K is that, again, if that 2x crop mode is there, you'd still be able to shoot in 6K at the crop mode, because 6K only requires 18 megapixels.
So in my personal opinion, 6K is not something that most of the people are going to be using. Also, they said they're going to be updating from recording at 200 megabytes per second all the way up to 400. So that means you're going to have to update your micro SD card, and it's probably going to be very pricey to be able to record at 400 megabytes per second. Reading and writing, well, mostly writing speed for those purposes. And now 6K, even though it's not as usable as you would think, because of most of the monitors, most of the TVs that people have, they're mostly still at 4K, or some of the screens that we're using for monitors are 1440p. But when you're shooting at 6K, you can downscale that video footage to 4K and retain that 6K detail. That's one of the pluses that you get with that.
Still be able to get at 25 megapixels access to 6K as well, obviously.
And the other thing is obviously also you can crop in
As 4K. But this is a 100 megapixel image. So this sensor is capable of a lot more than 6K, so we don't know if it's basically like it would.
The other thing I just wanted to let everybody know is that he keeps mentioning 100 megapixels as it's set in stone. That information is not set in stone yet.
I don't know if it's going to be binned or oversampled. We're not really sure how that's going to work, but I'm excited to see what they do with it. Now, we've already seen details about the batteries, indicating that it was going to be a 99.5 watt-hour battery. That's what's on the label that was approved by the FCC last month. The leak that we have today indicates a smaller, slightly smaller 95 watt-hour battery. I say smaller, that's still a gigantic battery. I don't know how we'd reconcile the details that we have today against the FCC sticker. Maybe it's a 99.5 watt-hour battery, but they're only going to give you access to 95 watts. I'm not really sure. But what we also have info on is that the flight time will get bumped up to 53 minutes, which that's what I've been hoping for, is that if they were going to make the battery.
So 53 minutes, that's on paper, or maybe if you're hovering still in zero wind conditions, most likely max you're going to get is possibly 42 minutes, I would say. If they're stating 52 minutes, I would say you're most likely have to cut 10 minutes off of the sticker and call it a 42.
Battery bigger, that they would bump up the flight time higher than the 46 minutes that we have now, well over 50 minutes, and it sounds
Never got 46 minutes on the Mavic 3 Pro.
like that sounds like that's what we're going to get. Now, when you have a battery that big, you need a charger, and it looks like they're going to fix that. We're going to be getting a 240 watt charger. Now,
So 240 watt charger, that's awesome. That's going to charge up your batteries much quicker than what we currently have. The only thing that I see that is I could see negative with that is that the life expectancy of your battery is going to be much lower, because the faster you're recharging those cells, the quicker those cells will wear out. That's just one thing to keep in mind when you're doing the super fast charging.
No news if that's going to be the standard charger or if that's an upgraded charger, if that's something that comes in a Fly More combo that you have to pay more for, or if it's just going to be in the Cine version. Remember, the Cine version is going to come with a 2 terabyte storage option, and the Pro version will likely either stay with the 8 or they'll double it as well to 16 gigabytes of onboard storage. But if this is a 95 watt hour battery and we have a 240 watt charger and we anticipate
If they're bumping up from 200 megabytes per second to 400, most likely they're going to bump up they'll double up the memory from 8 gigs to 16.
kind of standard efficiency rates, this thing could probably get up to 80% charge in under 30 minutes, maybe even full charge in 40 or less. That is cool. Or maybe you can charge 2 batteries in an hour or an hour and 10 minutes. And with a 53-minute flight time, that means that you could potentially just be cycling batteries, land, cycle, and just keep your batteries, flowing and charging and flying and flowing and charging. Now we do have images along with the leaked images of the drone of the controller, and we've been talking about the potential for the RC2 Plus controller or super controller. It looks bigger, it looks more robust. Also looks like it might have HDMI out and some other potential features. But one other thing,
Let me check it out again.
talking about images of the drone of the controller.
From the looks of it, honestly, it looks like the regular controller with a little tablet attached on top of it. I honestly, I don't really see a big difference between this and what we currently have with the RC controller. Yeah, honestly, it just looks like RC controller. It doesn't even look like the RC2. It just looks like RC with a tablet stuck on the Velcro or something like that on top of it.
We've been talking about the potential for the RC2 Plus controller or super controller. It looks bigger, it looks more robust. Also looks like it might have HDMI out and some other potential features. But one other thing that we have in the leaked details is that while OcuSync 4 is kind of the name of the game right now, that this drone would actually support OcuSync 4 Plus, which means that in addition to OcuSync 4, which is a 20-kilometer standard, that this would potentially be a 40-kilometer standard or a 25-mile.
You have the 25-mile at the OcuSync 4 or 4 Plus, if that's what they're going to roll out. That's going to be a major upgrade because currently with the Mavic 3 Pro, you definitely run into issues, especially if if you're in the city, there's a lot of interference. That's definitely going to be a game changer with that
Standard, and that's huge. I don't I don't know who needs that, but that's pretty cool. I don't know how they're doing that.
People that are close to the city, that's who needs it.
I don't know if they're using the additional cellular capacity that we've seen in some of the enterprise drones to make this happen. We'll see. My real hope is that that does not affect this drone's ability to interlink with and be part of that OcuSync 4 ecosystem that we've seen so many products released on recently, which I think the branding on that tells us that it will, because it's 04 plus, not 05. Additionally, we are hearing details that there would be a base model similar to just the Pro with a battery and like the N3 controller for $2,200. That's not too bad. I was actually kind of expecting more when I started seeing some of these specs, but that is right now the expectation that we have with the Mavic 4 Pro and the RC2 Plus controller being, $2,800, the Fly More combo version being maybe $3,500, and the Cine version being well over $4,000, maybe into $5,000 right now. As far as release, we were hoping that it would get released by the end of the year, but it looks now like we're going to be seeing it in potentially February or March, or at least announced in March, and then potentially released in April, I think, is the growing consensus. So we're just kicking that can down the road. So
The other way you can tell that most likely that's what it's going to be is because they haven't put Mavic 3 on sale at all yet.
So if you are in
It seems like all the other models are on sale except for the Mavic 3 Pro.
the camp of folks who need a drone now, maybe you crashed yours, maybe it's just not working anymore and you need to upgrade, or you're it's the end of the year, right? And you got money to spend before you do your taxes, and you want to invest some of your profits for the year, then the Air 3 is still available. The Mavic 3 is still available. The Mavic 3 Pro, Classic, right, Cine. Those drones are still currently available on the market and not terribly difficult to get, especially the Air 3, whereas the Air 3S, very difficult. And if you try to purchase drones directly from the DJI site, a lot of them are getting held up in customs, and that's an issue. Real quick, I just want to break into the video and mention that I do have memberships available.
That's the other issue is that, you know, the whole debacle with the Air 3S getting stuck at the customs. I'm sure they're going to have the same exact issue with the Mavic 4 or Mavic 4 Pro, and especially now as well with the whole drone fiasco that's been going on, you know, with the Martians invading New Jersey and New York area. I think there's going to be more issues with the FCC and just in general with drones and the whole thing with the pushing to close down any DJI products into the States. I think we're going to see a lot of issues. So if you can get your hands on Mavic 3, Mavic 3 Classic, Mavic 3 Pro, Air 3, Air 3S, I would say just get it. Don't wait for the next best thing, because unfortunately the way that it works, every year there's something new, better. You know, a month, you know, you can buy a computer today, a month from now your computer is obsolete because they have a new chip that's 2 times faster, 8 times faster than what you purchased. So the longer you wait, the longer you're holding out on the fun that you can have with the drone. And to be honest with you, if you're gonna do photography, I doubt you're gonna tell a difference between the Mavic 3 Pro or if I take the even Air 2S. If I take photos, you're not really going to know that much difference, except for, let's say, when it's low light. If it's low light, yeah, the Mavic 3 is going to do much better than the Air 2S. Now, one of the things I don't like about the Air 3S or the Air 3 is that the sensor, they made the sensor much smaller than the Air 2S. You had the 1-inch sensor on the Air 2S, and in my opinion the size of the sensor really makes a big difference, and that goes even for DSLRs when you're doing APS-C sensor, the crop sensor, or you're doing the full frame sensor. There's a huge difference. So in my opinion, that's why I stuck with the Air 2S, and then when I had the chance to upgrade, I went ahead and I did the Macro Four Thirds for the Hasselblad on the Mavic 3 Pro.
On the channel. But honestly, I like the idea of providing more. So as I create tutorial videos and how-tos and some of my...
Alright, so to break down, so we went ahead, so far what we have for the camera, it's going to be the same sensor, the 4/3 CMOS sensor. Now they're going to bump up to 100 megapixels, and we're going to go from 24 millimeter lens to the 28 millimeters. So it's going to be more zoomed in, which in my opinion is a plus, because I feel like 24 is a little bit too wide for a drone. Aperture, huge upgrade if they do go ahead and do this. So you're going to get the f2 instead of what we currently have, the f2.8 on the main camera on the Mavic 3. Now, what does that give you? That gives you a better low light performance. That's one of the main things that's going to do for you. Now the video, so you're going to 6K at 60 frames per second. Now, as I mentioned before, the 6K is not a huge difference, but what it can do for you is that you can shoot at 6K and then just downsample it to 4K, maintaining all the details from the 6K. For the slow motion, 4K at 120 frames per second, it's going to be amazing if you're doing like waterfall shots or any kind of moving objects. It's going to look amazing. Bitrate, so they're going to bump up to 400 from 200 megabytes per second. So you're going to have to, if you're not going to be doing the Cine with a built-in storage, you're going to have to upgrade your micro SD cards. And go to shopping. All right. Yeah, if you notice that a lot of them are, well, which is V60, and I believe they go up to V90, so 250 megabytes per second writing speed, I'm assuming, which is not fast enough. So let's do V90. I don't even know if they have that. No. All right, how about this? Fastest micro SD card writing speed. Right, 312 megabytes per second. So I wonder how that's going to work out if it's 400 and the fastest they currently have is 312. Let's look at this graph. Now these are SD cards. These are not micro SD cards. Yeah. All right. All right, dynamic range, 14 stops. That's pretty good. ISO dual native, so 400, 1600. So once again, it's going to give you a really good low light performance. It's going to give you a better dynamic range. The sensitivity of your sensor, instead of starting at 100, you're already starting either at 400 or 1600. So it's going to give you a much better low light performance. The battery life, they're going to improve that. They're saying, what was that, 52 or 54 minutes? 52 minutes of flight time. Like I said, I personally, honestly, I think maybe you're going to get 45. The 52 on paper is, the drone just hovering maybe at 4 feet off the ground with 0 speed. Indoor type of environment test. ND filter, the stepless electronic ND filter. I doubt they're going to do that. That's just too much, and they're not going to compromise on the size and the weight of the drone. Signal range, they're going to do the OcuSync 4 or 4 Plus. That's going to give you up to 25 miles. It's going to be amazing. One of the other things is that you're not trying to fly away 25 miles, but stronger signal means there's going to be less interference, especially if you're living in the city. Now the charger, they're going to upgrade to 240 watt, possibly, allegedly. So awesome in one aspect, that you're going to be able to charge your batteries much quicker. Now the negative is that the life expectancy of your battery is going to go down. That's the same thing with your phone. When you're supercharging your phone, the life expectancy of your phone's battery goes down. Now, the other thing that they have been mentioning, one of the other videos, that there's a 10-point starburst effect. So I don't know if anybody's familiar, but when you're stepping up on your aperture, the higher the number and you're shooting against the light, you'll notice that star effect. I'll Google it. Starburst effect from high aperture. So here's a picture. Now, you'll notice that the higher the number is, the more of a starburst effect you're getting. And some of the people are mentioning that there's going to be a software thing built into the drone, which I don't believe. That is just a fact that you get from the blades inside the lens. So it's nothing. It's not a software thing. It's just, if you want to call it side effect or just an effect of the blades inside the lens. Now the weight, we're going from 950 to 1,045 grams. So it's going to be a heavier drone. Granted, if we're going to have a larger battery and possibly that spherical looking front element of the camera, I'm sure it's going to add on extra weight. So that's it. My personal opinion is that most of these things that we went over could be false. Some of them could be correct. Maybe all of them are correct. In my opinion, we're not going to know until DJI finally releases everything. Once they release the drone, that's when we're going to actually know what was correct, what's incorrect. You never want to hype yourself up too much. Like I said, if you have an opportunity to get a great discount on a drone, get it now, because even when the Mavic 4 is going to be released, there's going to be a chance that it's going to be really hard to get your hands on it due to the fact that, the whole drone debacle, and even with the Air 3S, it's still hard to get those drones, and it's been a while since they've released that. So that's that. That's my intake on the Mavic 4 Pro. Maybe as the information comes out, I'm going to be making more videos and be posting. Please hit a like and subscribe if you want to hear more.